Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is different. It's about a man who discovered that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do in corporate America is simply tell the truth. This is the story of Murphy Clark and what happened when he refused to stay silent. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. Subject line: immediate termination. Murphy Clark. My name is Murphy Clark. I'm 37 years old, and until that moment, I was the Senior Quality Assurance Manager at Meridian Pharmaceuticals, one of the largest drug manufacturers on the East Coast. 12 years with the company. Started as a lab technician fresh out of college, worked my way up through pure determination and an obsessive attention to detail that my colleagues used to joke about. Murphy's at it again. Checking everything twice, they'd say. But that obsession with doing things right had kept me employed through 3 different management changes and 2 corporate restructurings. Until it didn't. I stared at the email from HR Director Janet Morrison. Effective immediately, your employment with Meridian Pharmaceuticals is terminated due to insubordination and failure to follow direct management instructions. Please report to security to surrender your access badge and company equipment. 12 years of perfect performance reviews, 12 years of catching problems before they became disasters. And now, I was fired for doing exactly what they'd always praised me for. But let me back up. Let me tell you how a company that's supposed to save lives decided that profits were worth more than the people taking their medications. It started 6 months earlier when Meridian hired Dr. Patricia Kellerman as the new Vice President of Operations. She came from a consulting firm that specialized in operational efficiency, corporate speak for cutting costs wherever possible. Her first company-wide meeting was enlightening. "We're entering a new era of competitive manufacturing," she announced to a room full of department heads. "Our shareholders expect results, and we're going to deliver them." She clicked to her first slide, a chart showing production costs versus competitor pricing. "We're 23% above industry average. That changes now." I raised my hand. "Dr. Kellerman, what about our quality metrics? We've maintained a 99.7% purity rate across all products for the past 5 years. That's why our medications command premium pricing." She smiled, that cold smile I'd come to know too well. "Murphy, isn't it? Quality is important, but so is survival. A perfect product that prices us out of the market helps no one." After the meeting, she pulled me aside. "I've heard good things about your department. Very thorough, very detailed. I think we can work together to find some efficiencies." I should have seen the warning signs then, but I was naive. I thought she meant improving processes, not cutting corners. The first red flag came 3 weeks later. Dr. Kellerman implemented new, streamlined testing protocols for our diabetes medication line. Instead of the rigorous 14-day stability testing we'd always done, she wanted us to reduce it to 7 days. "Look at the data trends," she insisted during our department meeting. "Day 7 results are virtually identical to day 14 results. We can extrapolate." "Virtually identical isn't identical," I replied. "These medications sit in pharmacies and medicine cabinets for months. We need to know they're stable. The FDA minimum requirement is 7 days for accelerated stability testing," she shot back. "We're meeting regulatory standards." "Meeting minimums isn't the same as ensuring patient safety," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "Murphy, I need team players here, people who understand that perfect can be the enemy of good." But here's what she didn't tell the room. Those day 14 tests occasionally caught problems that day 7 tests missed. Not often, maybe once every few months, but when it happened, it meant the difference between a medication that worked properly and one that could lose potency, or worse, become toxic over time. I approved the change officially, but kept running the full 14-day tests in my own lab, using personal time and leftover samples. Call it Insurance. The second red flag was bigger. Meridian manufactured a blood pressure medication called CardioMax that was used by over 200,000 patients nationwide. The active ingredient came from a supplier in China, and our contract required us to test every batch for purity and contamination. Dr. Kellerman called me into her office on a Thursday afternoon. "Murphy, I've been reviewing our supplier testing protocols. We're testing every single batch from Shenzhen Chemical. It's redundant. It's required," I said, "both by our internal standards and FDA regulations." "Required is a strong word," she replied, sliding a document across her desk. "Look at this legal opinion from our compliance team. We can use statistical sampling, test every fifth batch instead of every batch, and use those results to certify the others." I read the document carefully. It was technically legal, but it was also dangerous. "Dr. Kellerman, Shenzhen Chemical has had quality control issues in the past. That's exactly why we test every batch. Issues that were resolved 2 years ago," she said. "Murphy, you're not seeing the bigger picture. This change alone will save us $400,000 annually in testing costs. And if a contaminated batch slips through?" Her expression hardened. "That's why we have insurance and legal teams." I left her office with a sick feeling in my stomach. She wasn't talking about medication safety anymore. She was talking about acceptable risk to corporate profits. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I logged into the FDA's adverse event reporting system and looked up CardioMax. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 6 months, there had been a 340% increase in reported side effects from CardioMax users. Dizziness, nausea, irregular heartbeat. Symptoms that could indicate contamination or degraded active ingredients. But the reports were scattered across different states, different doctors, different reporting systems. No one was seeing the pattern except me. I spent the weekend building a comprehensive report. Patient data, batch numbers, supplier records, testing results. The pattern was clear. The batches that showed problems were all from periods when our expedited testing protocols had been used due to production pressures. Monday morning, I knocked on Dr. Kellerman's door with a thick folder in my hands. "I need to show you something," I said. She glanced at the folder with obvious irritation. "Murphy, if this is about the Shenzhen testing protocols, I thought we'd settled that." "It's about patient safety," I said, opening the folder. "I've been tracking adverse event reports for CardioMax. There's a clear correlation between reduced testing and increased side effects." For the next 20 minutes, I walked her through the data, showed her the batch numbers, the timeline, the patient complaints. Her face remained expressionless throughout. When I finished, she closed the folder without looking at the last few pages. "This is interesting research, Murphy," she said carefully. "But you're drawing conclusions from incomplete data. Correlation isn't causation. Dr. Kellerman, we have over 200 documented cases of severe side effects that correlate directly with nothing," she interrupted. "You're seeing patterns where none exist. These are normal statistical variations." "Normal?" I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "A 340% increase is normal?" She stood up, walked to her window. "Murphy, you're a good scientist. But you're not an epidemiologist. You're not a statistician. You're making connections that simply aren't there." "Then let's get epidemiologists involved. Let's report this to the FDA and let them—" "No." Her voice cut like ice. "We're not reporting anything because there's nothing to report. You've wasted company time and resources on this conspiracy theory." I stared at her. "Conspiracy theory? What would you call it? You think we're deliberately poisoning patients? You think the FDA, our board of directors, our entire medical team is all somehow missing what only Murphy Clark can see?" The way she said my name made it sound like an accusation. "I think mistakes happen," I said quietly. "And I think when they do, we have a responsibility to fix them." She sat back down, her tone shifting to something almost maternal. "Murphy, you've been with this company for 12 years. You have a good job. A good salary, good benefits. Don't throw that away over some statistical anomaly that probably means nothing. And if it means something, then our legal team will handle it appropriately. I left her office knowing I'd crossed a line. Not because I was wrong, but because I was right, and she knew it. That afternoon, I did something I'd never imagined doing. I called the FDA's MedWatch reporting system and filed a detailed adverse event report, not as a Meridian employee, but as a concerned healthcare professional who'd identified a pattern. The next morning, Dr. Kellerman called me into her office again. This time, Janet Morrison from HR was there too.
Murphy, Dr. Kellerman began. It's come to our attention that you may have shared confidential company information with outside parties. My heart started pounding. I reported a potential safety issue to the appropriate regulatory body. That's not only legal, it's required. Required by whom? Janet asked, consulting a thick folder. By federal whistleblower protection laws, by FDA regulations, by basic medical ethics. Dr. Kellerman shook her head sadly. Murphy, you violated your confidentiality agreement. You used proprietary company data to file false reports with federal agencies. That's grounds for immediate termination. False reports? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I documented everything, every batch number, every adverse event. Selected data, taken out of context, to support a predetermined conclusion, Janet interrupted. Our medical team has reviewed your research. Their assessment is that you fundamentally misunderstood both the data and proper statistical analysis. Then show me their analysis, I demanded. Show me where I went wrong. The two women exchanged glances. That's proprietary information, Dr. Kellerman said. I'm afraid we can't share internal medical assessments with outside parties. Outside parties. I'd been an employee for 12 years and now I was an outside party. Murphy, Janet continued, we're prepared to offer you a generous severance package, 6 months' salary, continued health benefits, and a positive reference letter. All you need to do is sign a non-disclosure agreement acknowledging that your concerns were addressed through proper internal channels. The room went very quiet. They weren't just firing me. They were trying to buy my silence. And if I don't sign, then you'll be terminated for cause, Dr. Kellerman said simply. Violation of confidentiality agreements, insubordination, and filing false reports with federal agencies. That goes on your permanent record. I looked at these two women, both supposedly dedicated to public health, both more concerned about protecting the company than protecting patients. I need time to think. You have until end of business today, Janet said, sliding the severance agreement across the table. I spent my lunch break in my car staring at the severance papers. 6 months' salary was tempting. My wife, Sarah, was pregnant with our second child, and we had a mortgage, daycare costs, all the usual financial pressures of a growing family. But I couldn't stop thinking about the adverse event reports. Real people taking medication they trusted to help them, not knowing it might be making them sicker. I thought about Mrs. Eleanor Rodriguez, a 67-year-old woman from Phoenix whose report I'd read. She'd been taking CardioMax for 3 years without problems. Then suddenly developed severe dizziness and heart palpitations that sent her to the emergency room twice in 1 month. Her doctor couldn't figure out what was wrong, but I could see that her symptoms started exactly when her pharmacy switched to a batch from Shenzhen Chemical that had been certified through statistical sampling instead of direct testing. I thought about James Chen, a 45-year-old teacher from Seattle who reported similar symptoms, and Maria Santos from Dallas, and dozens of others, all connected by a thread that only I seemed to see. At 4:30, I walked back into Janet Morrison's office and placed the unsigned severance agreement on her desk. I can't sign this, I said. She nodded, as if she'd expected it. Then you're terminated for cause, effective immediately.
Security will escort you out. As I cleaned out my desk, my colleagues avoided eye contact. Word travels fast in corporate environments, and everyone knew that getting too close to someone being terminated for cause could be career suicide. But as I packed my personal items, I made sure to slip a small USB drive into my jacket pocket. Everything I documented about CardioMax, all the data that Dr. Kellerman said didn't exist, was on that drive. The next 3 weeks were the darkest of my life. Without cause termination meant no unemployment benefits. I applied for dozens of jobs in pharmaceutical quality assurance, but somehow word had gotten out. Difficult to work with, one recruiter told me off the record. Unreliable, said another. Meridian's legal team had done their job well. They'd painted me as a disgruntled employee who'd violated confidentiality agreements and filed false reports with federal agencies. Who would want to hire someone like that? Sarah tried to be supportive, but I could see the worry in her eyes as our savings dwindled and my job search continued to come up empty. Then, on a Thursday morning, everything changed. I was checking my email when I saw a message from Dr. Jennifer Walsh at the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations. The subject line read, Re-MedWatch Report, CardioMax Adverse Events. Mr. Clark, thank you for your detailed adverse event reports submitted last month. Our preliminary investigation has identified significant concerns regarding Meridian Pharmaceuticals' quality control practices for CardioMax. We would like to schedule a meeting to discuss your findings in detail and review any additional documentation you may have. Please note that this communication is confidential and protected under federal whistleblower statutes. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Office of Criminal Investigations, Food and Drug Administration. My hands were shaking as I read the email twice. Someone was finally taking this seriously. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday at the FDA's field office in Baltimore. I drove down early, nervous but determined. Dr. Walsh turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who got straight to business. Your report was remarkably thorough, she said, reviewing a thick file. We've been tracking increased adverse events for CardioMax, but we hadn't identified the pattern you documented. So, I was right? There is a correlation? There's definitely something there, she confirmed. We've opened a formal investigation, but we need more than adverse event reports. We need internal documentation showing that Meridian knew about the problems and chose not to act. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a folder. I kept copies of everything. Testing protocols, batch records, email exchanges with management, internal reports that were ignored. Her eyes widened as she flipped through the documents.
This is comprehensive. How did you manage to document all this?
I've been in quality assurance for 12 years, I said. Documenting everything is what I do. For the next 3 hours, I walked her through everything. The pressure to cut testing protocols, the statistical sampling scheme, the adverse event patterns, the meeting where Dr. Kellerman dismissed patient safety concerns. This is potential criminal behavior, Dr. Walsh said finally. If we can prove that Meridian knowingly distributed contaminated or substandard medication, we're looking at federal charges. What happens now? Now we build a case. And Mr. Clark, you should know, companies like Meridian don't take kindly to whistleblowers. This could get ugly for you personally. I thought about Sarah, about our growing family, about the blacklisting that was already destroying my career. It's already ugly, I said. At least this way, maybe we can prevent other people from getting hurt. The investigation took 4 months. During that time, I lived in a strange limbo. I'd found temporary work as a lab technician at a small medical device company, a massive step down from my previous position, but it paid the bills. Meanwhile, the FDA's investigation expanded. They'd found other whistleblowers inside Meridian, employees who'd been afraid to speak up, but were willing to cooperate with federal investigators. The picture that emerged was damning. Meridian hadn't just cut corners on CardioMax. They'd implemented similar cost-cutting measures across multiple product lines. Reduced testing, statistical sampling instead of comprehensive analysis, pressure on quality assurance staff to approve marginal batches. But the company wasn't sitting idle. Their legal team was working overtime to discredit anyone cooperating with the investigation. My former colleagues started receiving visits from corporate security, asking questions about my mental state and reliability. Then the harassment started. It began with phone calls at odd hours, hang-ups when I answered. Then someone started following me to work, always staying just far enough back to avoid being confronted, but close enough to be noticed. One morning I found my car tires slashed in my own driveway. "Maybe you should back off," Sarah said one night after we'd had to call the police about another hang-up call. "Maybe this isn't worth it." I understood her fear. But I also couldn't forget about Eleanor Rodriguez and James Chen, and all the other patients whose trust had been betrayed.
"If I back off, they win," I said. "And people keep getting hurt."
The break in the case came from an unexpected source. Dr. Kellerman's assistant, a young woman named Rebecca Torres, had been secretly recording conversations for months. She'd watched her boss ignore safety concerns, pressure employees to falsify records, and explicitly choose profits over patient welfare. Rebecca's recordings were devastating. In one, Dr. Kellerman could be heard saying, "Look, some people are going to have side effects no matter what we do. Our job is to minimize liability, not eliminate risk." In another, she discussed the adverse event reports I'd compiled. "Clark thinks he's some kind of hero, but he's just a troublemaker. Let legal handle him." Most damning was a recorded phone call with Meridian's CEO, where Dr. Kellerman explicitly acknowledged that increased testing would likely reveal problems with several batches. "If we start looking too closely, we're going to find issues we don't want to find. Better to maintain plausible deniability." With Rebecca's recordings and my documentation, the FDA had enough for criminal referrals.
The day of the arrest was surreal. I watched the news from my living room as FBI agents led Dr. Kellerman out of Meridian's headquarters in handcuffs. The CEO and 2 other executives were arrested the same day. The charges were serious: conspiracy to defraud the FDA, introducing adulterated drugs into interstate commerce, and wire fraud. If convicted, they faced up to 20 years in federal prison. But the personal vindication felt hollow. The damage was already done. Over 300 patients had been hospitalized due to contaminated CardioMax. 3 had died, including Eleanor Rodriguez, the 67-year-old woman from Phoenix whose adverse event report had been one of the first I'd read. I testified at the trial 6 months later. It was terrifying and cathartic at the same time. For the first time in over a year, I could tell the complete truth about what had happened, without worrying about NDAs or corporate retaliation. Dr. Kellerman's defense team tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee with a grudge, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury convicted her and the other executives on all counts. So what happened to Murphy Clark after all this? Well, that's where the story gets complicated. The federal whistleblower protection laws that were supposed to protect him, they worked, eventually. But money can't undo a damaged reputation or the stress of fighting a corporate giant. It took 2 years for Murphy to find another position in pharmaceutical quality assurance. Companies were still wary of hiring someone who'd blown the whistle on his previous employer, even though he'd been proven right. The industry has a long memory for troublemakers.
But here's the thing, and this is why I'm telling you this story. Murphy Clark didn't just expose one company's corruption. His case led to industry-wide reforms. New FDA oversight procedures, stronger whistleblower protections, mandatory adverse event monitoring systems. Meridian Pharmaceuticals paid $500 million in fines and was banned from manufacturing medications for 2 years. Dr. Kellerman served 18 months in federal prison. Not enough, maybe, but more than most corporate criminals ever face. And Murphy? He's now the director of quality assurance at a nonprofit pharmaceutical company that manufactures low-cost medications for developing countries. He makes less money than he did at Meridian, but he sleeps better at night.
The system worked, eventually. But only because one person decided that doing the right thing was worth risking everything.
The question I want to leave you with is this.
How many Murphy Clarks are out there right now? How many people know about dangerous shortcuts, toxic cover-ups, or outright fraud, but stay silent because they're afraid of what speaking up will cost them? And maybe more importantly, if you were in Murphy's position, what would you do? Let me know in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, make sure to subscribe. These are the stories that don't usually make the news, but they should. Because sometimes the most important battles are fought by ordinary people who simply refuse to look away. Until next time, stay skeptical, stay informed, and remember, the truth always has a way of coming to light, even when powerful people would rather it didn't. 6 months after the trial, Murphy Clark received an unexpected phone call. It was from a quality assurance manager at another major pharmaceutical company. She'd seen the news coverage of the Meridian case and had her own concerns about her company's practices. "Mr. Clark," she said, "I think I need your help, and I think you're going to want to hear what I have to tell you. But that's a story for another time.